I know what to do from here. I'm going to be doing some informal learning now. There's only about 15 minutes left before we start putting on tefillin, so no text is here. I'm just going to share with you some of the Agaras Chazal from the famous sugya of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza, Gemara Gittin. Okay, so the story is told that when, I shouldn't call it a story, the historical narrative is told that when Bar Kamtza was excluded from the wedding party, he wanted to get the Rabbanan who did not protest exclusion in trouble. So he went to the Roman Caesar or procurator and he said, look, the Jews are rebelling against you. As a proof, I'll show that an animal that you donate for an offering will not be offered as a carbon. So what he did was, Bar Kamtza, is he brought this sheep from the Roman emperor and he made a mum in the eye, a blemish in the eye, that according to the very strict exacting laws of karbanos, of sacrifice after you brought in the Beis HaMikdash, it's considered a blemish and it's something that cannot be sacrificed. But according to the pagan rites, there's nothing wrong with such an animal. So it says that in the Sanusa Shorabishaya ben Avkulus Hechrivas Beis Kachenu, it was the usually translated as humility, and in this case it would be the passivity, the unwillingness to sometimes break the law for the greater good, to break a particular law to save the Torah in general, is what brought our Beis HaMikdash down. And here's the story. The other rabbis wanted to sacrifice this, it wasn't a sheep, I'm sorry, this calf that Bar Kamtza brought from the Roman emperor in order to maintain the peace. Yes, it was against the law to bring a balmum as a carbon, but so that the Roman Caesar shouldn't grow furious at the Jews and take it as a sign of rebellion, they would look away from this law. So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus told them, people are going to say that you can take a balmum and bring it for a carbon. It'll be a distortion of the halacha. We don't want that. So then the rabbi said, okay, well, if you don't want to bring a balmum as a carbon, how about if we put a hit on Bar Kamtza so that he cannot go back to the Caesar and report the fact that we didn't bring his offering as sacrifice. So again, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus said, well, then people are going to say that anyone who's matul mum b'kodshim, anyone who blemishes an animal that was meant to be brought as a sacrifice, that's a capital offense, that such a person should die. People don't know the backlot story, that this is a fellow who's ratted us out to the Roman Caesar, and that this is going to bring a violent repression from the Romans. People are just going to think, cause and effect. He damaged the eye of this carbon, and the rabbis killed him. It seems to be a capital offense. Rabbi Yochanan says, in the Sanusa Shel Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus, it was this, in a certain sense, passivity, the unwillingness to take charge, even to the point of sometimes taking the charge to break a law in order to save the entirety of the Torah. We have an expression in Chazal, Pa'amim shebitula shel Torah zui kiyuma. There are times when the very nullification of the Torah and Torah law is really what maintains and establishes the Torah. A very prime example of this was that the redaction of the Mishnayos by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, by Rabbi Judah the Prince. So the rule is that we learn from a pasuk, Echtav le'rubei tarasi k'may zayin echshavu. If I would write the majority of my Torah, I would be considered, I would be reckoned as a stranger, and that there is a prohibition against writing Torah Shebal Peh, committing the oral Torah to writing, and this was a prohibition that had to be transgressed in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, because he sized up his generation and he saw, up until now, the oral Torah could be transmitted in a purely oral way, but following the exiles and the suffering and the daichik for panasa, the inability to make a living that Jews have to endure now, if we don't do something to assure the continued remembrance of the oral Torah, it will definitely be forgotten. So he broke one law to maintain the entirety of the Torah, even though it was a pretty all-encompassing law about the transmission of the Torah. That's an example of Pa'amim Bitula Shal Torah Zui Kiyuma. And apparently, Rabbi ben Avkilus is being criticized by the jury of history for not taking this kind of an action. Choose the lesser of two evils: either sacrifice the animal, or kill the bearer of the bad news, who's going to tell the Roman Caesar that we didn't sacrifice the animal, but do something, and he didn't. So sure enough, Kamtza went back to the Caesar of Rome and reported truthfully. Didn't tell him the reason why, didn't tell him the true reason, but he said the Jews didn't want to sacrifice the calf that you sent, and that is when Caesar sent a Roman general, Neron Caesar. There were three rich people in Jerusalem, three very wealthy people in Jerusalem. One's name was Nakdimon ben Gurion, another's was Kalba Sabua, Ben Kalba Sabua, the third was Ben Tzitzis HaKeses. These were nicknames. Why was Nakdimon ben Gurion? It says because the sun shined for him. It was a way of describing his great wealth. Why was Ben Kalba Sabua so called? He says he was a great Nachdas Eirich, he was a person who extended a lot of hospitality. And it was said about Ben Kalba Sabua that anyone who came into his home hungry as a dog, Kalba, would leave Savua, would leave satiated and well fed. Why was Ben Tzitzis HaKeses so called? Because he had so many footmen, he had so many valets, that when he would walk in the street, you have to understand that the current Jewish custom of wearing a talis and tefillin only for the morning service is just that, it's a current custom. There was a time in Jewish history, and there's still great Talmidei Chachamim, great tzaddikim to this very day, who wear the talis and tefillin for the all daylight hours. So it says that whenever he would go in the street walking, the tzitzis, the fringes of his talis, would drag not on the floor, they would drag on blankets and pillows that were carried for him through the streets, as he clothed himself always, and apparently his linen was always silk and satin garments. Another version why it's called Ben Tzitzis HaKeses is because his chair was found among the greats of Rome. He would be included on diplomatic junkets to have audiences with the Roman Caesar. He was one of the Jews who would accompany, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he would go on diplomatic junkets to Rome. So these three, when the siege of Jerusalem started, these three wealthy men got together. Put it in here. Okay. That's certainly more comfortable if you can do it. Just a moment, we're just rearranging the mic here. Okay. I'll pull up a little bit. I'll speak mamish into this mic. Okay. So it says that the three of them got together, and one said, I will be mafanes, it means I'll sustain with a food supply the citizens of Jerusalem with wheat and barley. Another said, I will sustain them with wine, with salt. Salt obviously is very important because it preserves meats and so on, and oil. And one said that I will provide the fuel, I'll provide the wood that's necessary to stoke all the ovens that we need to bake bread and to cook food. And the Rabbanim who were stuck in the siege of Jerusalem praised these men that they were stepping up to the plate, so to speak, in Jewry's moment of need. And in particular, they praised the one who was going to provide the wood. Rav Chisda gave his servants the keys to all of his warehouses, but not to the warehouse for wood. Why? Because he said for one warehouse of barley or wheat, you're going to need 60 warehouses of wood. Because the fuel was the most precious commodity. What good was all the food if it was in a raw state and you couldn't cook or bake it? And these three rich men, these three wealthy men, had enough to sustain Jerusalem for 21 years with all the supplies that we mentioned up until now. Parenthetically, just an interesting footnote, Ben Kalba Sabua was Rabbi Akiva's father-in-law. He wasn't particularly fond of Rabbi Akiva, not the first time a father-in-law hasn't been fond of a son-in-law, but that is the fact that he was Rabbi Akiva's father-in-law. However, that to deal with, up against these three wealthy philanthropists, you had the zealotry of the Bayanim. They were living at that time in Jerusalem as well. Our Chazal take a very dim view of them. They describe them as Anoshim Reikim Upchuzim. Empty people, hotheads, capricious people. The rabbis wanted to make peace overtures to the Romans who were besieging the city, but these zealots would not allow them to, and their attitude was, on the contrary, let's go out and wage war against them. The rabbis told the Bayanim, now is not the time. We don't have the troops to defeat them, we're very, very outnumbered, and if you try to wage war against them, they're going to slaughter us. So these Bayanim decide to push the issue. What they do so that they would force resistance, force a military action against the Romans. They went and they set fire to all of these warehouses that we described above, of barley, of wheat, of oil, of salt, of wood, everything that was needed to sustain, to hold out. Obviously the Romans could not maintain a siege for 21 years. The Jews had the supplies, the food supplies, to resist starvation for 21 years. It would be a war of attrition, but eventually they'd defeat the Romans. But because the Bayanim destroyed these warehouses of food, that's what caused the famine and the hunger that we read about so poignantly in the Kines this morning, and that's what really forced the hand of both the Jews and the Romans to come to such a tragic end. Let's see if we have time for one more quick one. Supposed to start on Nachas Tefillin in 3 minutes. Okay, when we read the Kina this morning of Schar Ma'aseh Tsar B'fnim, talking about Titus of Russia, we spoke about the fact that he degraded and desecrated the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies in the Beis HaMikdash. And I also spoke about how during his ocean passage, as he wrapped up the vessels, the implements of the Beis HaMikdash, in the curtain that divided the inner and outer sanctum, so he got on a ship and he went on the ship to Rome. And when a storm started to rise on the ocean, he taunted God, and he said, it looks like God that has only dominion over the water. When Paro came, he drowned him in water. When Sisera came, he drowned him in water. And he's trying to drown me as well. If he's really strong, let him do battle with me on dry land. So a baskal, a echo of a prophetic voice came out and said, Russia ben B'nai Shel Esav Russia, you wicked person, descendant, scion of the wicked Esav. He says, I have an insignificant little creature on dry land called a gnat. And we'll see if I can do war with you using the gnat. As soon as he alighted, as soon as he got to the port in Italy and he got off the ship, it says that a gnat entered his nostril and was pecking away at his brain and growing larger and larger. And he had tremendous headaches as a result of this, Titus. When he passed a blacksmith hammering on the anvil one day, he saw that noise caused the creature that was wrapping away inside his skull to subside. And when the blacksmith would stop hammering, then the gnat, at this time already the size of a bird, would hammer away, so to speak, at his brain. So he always ordered a blacksmith to come. Whenever a Gentile blacksmith would come, he would pay them 4 zuzim. When a Jewish blacksmith would come, he wouldn't pay them anything. He said it's enough payment for the Jew that he gets to see his enemy suffering. They did this for 30 days, After 30 days, it didn't help anymore, because the Pavlovian response, I guess, the gnat had grown accustomed and was no longer quieted by the hammering of the blacksmiths. Ultimately, he died, Titus. They did a post-mortem. A pathologist found a tzipor dror, I'm not sure exactly what that is, a swallow, I believe, and it weighed the weight of 2 slayim, and it had like a copper beak. That's what the gnat that had entered into him as a punishment for his chira v'giduv, his blasphemy of God, had morphed into. Okay, at this point we're going to cease with the informal Tisha B'Av session. We're going to put on our tefillin, and mincha is in 5 minutes at 1:38, the earliest possible mincha. For those of you who have been listening in the conference call, I will now be ending the call. Should have a meaningful and easy fast for the rest of the day.